It's one thing to kind of come at it from the angle of faith. And in some ways, I think sometimes people separate faith from their practical life.
Right.
But in this case, it's like it's one and the same, right?
Yeah.
Personal development is actually a God-given responsibility for every human being.
Welcome to the Midweek Motivation Podcast, where we bring practical help for your faith and life. Here's today's episode.
Hey, welcome to this week's Midweek Motivation. My name is Jess, and I'm one of the pastors here at Westside, and I'm here with Pastor Gabe.
Yeah,
our
nice to
lead
see you.
pastor. Yeah. We are wrapping up this awesome series that we've been doing, Healthy Households, and we got to talk on Sunday about personal development in our faith.
Yeah.
And so we thought that we would dive in on the practical side of personal development and how, like, what's the nuts and bolts? Like, what does it look like in our daily life?
Yeah, because it's one thing to kind of come at it from the angle of faith. And in some ways, I think sometimes people separate faith from their practical life.
Right.
But in this case, it's like it's one and the same, right?
Yeah.
Personal development is actually a God-given responsibility for every human being. And we've been talking about how it relates to the aspect of being in a household and how you could lead your household in personal development.
Yeah.
So something I wanted to actually ask you about, Jess, is kind of give us a little bit of background, like what got you interested, because I know you're as much of a nerd about this stuff as I am.
Such a nerd. Yeah.
But what got you interested in personal development, and what have been maybe some of the top resources that you've grown from and used to grow as a person?
Yeah. Well, what initially got me into it was living life in a way that was not helpful and wanting to make a change. And so I grew up in faith here at Westside. And so this is kind of like I'm steeped in it. Mm-hmm. And it started off like when I was in my 20s, really simply, and just like making a list of priorities. Like, okay, I know that if I want to be headed in the right direction, then I need to prioritize right. And that means that I put God first. And then like my marriage and my family comes next. And then everything else comes after that. And I started off with that simple list, and I would go through it every year and make sure that my priorities were in the right place. And then more recently, probably like in the last 10 years, I started to get real like nitty gritty about it.
Okay.
And I've got some great resources that that I lean into. And my favorite, I read this book years ago, and it's written by Michael Hyatt, and it's called Your Best Year Ever. And I recommend it to people all the time. It changed my life.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And so I lean into his system to help me really make sure that like all of the gears are running in all of the different parts of my life. And I started off slow. Like, I don't feel like you don't have to do a crash course and be like, okay, this year everything has to be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it really helps you to take one step at a time. And at this point in time, every year, I'm doing this right now, I go through a process of evaluation and figuring out what all of the different aspects of my life are, where I'm at, and whether or not they're leading me towards my life goal, really. And it's super beneficial. Since I started doing it, life changes every year, and I'm constantly seeing growth.
That's great.
Love it.
Yeah. Okay, how many areas are we talking about? 100? 200?
I think Hyatt breaks it down. I want to say to like 10 or 11.
Okay.
But
so not so many.
No, not so many. And honestly, there are so many different resources. I know you've got your resources that you like to lean into. There are so many different resources, and they kind of break them out into chunks, but they're pretty like similar, I would say.
Yeah.
And they're real similar, I think, even to the things that you listed out on Sunday.
Right, we listed 6 on Sunday.
Yeah. So I think they all kind of fit into that.
By the way, you mentioned your marriage
Yes.
from, talking about a simple priority list. And you had a marriage event recently, didn't you? Like 20 years of something.
Yeah.
Happy anniversary to you and Rob.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. This whole idea of personal development and how it can be like a leading stone to changing your household it's so obvious in my household. I think. Yeah. So 20 years for me and my family, that's a huge milestone. So
yeah, totally. Okay, I one question that I think people have, I always have, when I'm trying to pick out, like you just mentioned a favorite of yours, Michael Hyatt.
Yeah.
and I know he's got all sorts of, the list is long about the ways Michael Hyatt can help you with this stuff, which is awesome. But what if somebody's out there going, oh, well, how in the world would I know which one of these things that I'm getting the Instagram ads for or whatever to what's going to be good? How do I filter that? How did you evaluate some of these? What are some of the considerations you had?
Michael Hyatt was recommended to me by Steve, another one of our pastors at Westside. And
you actually trust Steve's stuff he says?
Very much so,
Everything he says?
Most
of the stuff he says.
And so I read the book and checked it out. Like, I think that's what you have to do. I've also read Brendon Burchard, who, is
one of my favorites.
Yeah. And the systems, I think that the resources are pretty similar, but they come at it from a different direction.
For sure.
And I just naturally rebel against systems. And so I needed something in my practical life that helped me to organize. Whereas Brendon Burchard comes at it from a different perspective, and I'll let you speak to that, which I do a little bit more naturally. So it wasn't as helpful for me to lean in on that side. I needed something that helped me kind of shore up some weakness. So that's why I chose what I chose.
That's cool. On my side, I'll say this about the filter. I think that's really good because you're picking something that fits the need that you have in the moment.
Exactly.
But also that does resonate with you, and you're inspired by.
Yeah.
And then I think beyond that, there's other things too to look at, because you might be looking at some wide variety of things like theological things. And if you're, learning to follow Jesus, it's important that you don't grab a resource that's going to lead you in a different direction.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And but most of this stuff on personal growth is probably going to be fairly neutral, but it's something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And if there's religious overtones in what you're looking at, you might just check, where's this coming from?
Yeah.
And, somebody once taught me a long time ago, like when you want to evaluate a thing, you got to find out what's the end of the thing and what's that trajectory that it's going to lead you to, and decide, is that where I want to go?
Right.
And I think that's so. On some of these resources, some of them go in some funny places.
Yeah.
And you just have to keep, I think, your antenna up as you're picking some of these things.
It's true. And that's something that I'm careful about in all of my resources that I dive into. I want to learn a little bit more about where it's coming from, like who the author is and what inspires and motivates them.
Yeah.
And if it's God, then cool.
Yeah, that helps, right?
Yeah. How about you? How do you geek out?
Well, obsessively. But I would say, you mentioned that it was for you like having some difficulty in life that led you to the realization that you really wanted to pursue this. I think for me, it was probably a little more as a young leader, first off in ministry, having been mentored by the famous Pastor Ken. If you're a Westsider, you know that reference. If you're not, once you meet him, you'll know why. We all talk about him. He had recommended some books like John Maxwell stuff. That was my I cut my teeth on John Maxwell, the leadership guru, all of his books, the 21 Laws of Leadership, Developing the Leader Inside You, Developing the Leader Around You, all of these kind of resources. And we, as part of this weekly, get this, tape club.
I think I may have seen those boxes of tapes around.
The staff at our church would buy boxes of these tapes. They'd be sent, and it came with like a paper handout, and we'd stick it in the little cassette recorder, and we'd sit around a table and listen, fill in the notes. But it was I was eating it up. I was like, I love this stuff. Eventually, it became more like I was finding resources, and then I would use those resources to train somebody else, and so that kind of developed that way. But I will say, during COVID, which was such a very difficult time for me and for our church and for so many leaders, I also came to the point I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get some help. So I reached out to a company that was run by Brendon Burchard, and they were offering some coaching. I decided to sign up for this coaching. It was a 12-week coaching thing, and I loved it. And it was speaking to, same thing, all the areas I felt like I needed help with. And it cost me a chunk of change. I actually had to sell a Jeep that I had. in order to pay for it.
Wow.
But it was one of those things I was like, that's good. I need that more than I need the Jeep.
Yeah, that's investment. That's great.
Yeah. So,
hey, just jumping in right in the middle of this podcast episode to tell you about a resource that you need in your life. If you feel ever stuck in your faith, or if you feel like I want to grow my faith, but I just don't quite know what the steps are, we got a resource for you called Sticky Faith in a Slippery World. I mean, this world is changing and it's crazy, and we all need something firm to stand on. And I wrote a book for you called Sticky Faith in a Slippery World. You can get your copy right now at the link in the description.
Brendan's stuff is based on something called the High Performance Habits, and it's 6 habits that really help you achieve and perform at another level. But I would say there are really 10 things that it measures. So similar probably to the way Michael Hyatt lays things out is that it's going to look at the aspects of your life.
Yeah.
And then last week at Westside, we broke them down into just to try to keep it a little simpler. We broke it down into a few things: faith, health, people, impact, growth, and money.
Yeah.
Thinking about, well, if we could consolidate these into bigger buckets, it might be more helpful for all of us. Like, what area do you want to grow in? Faith, health, people, impact, growth, and money. And so we were talking about how you lead your household, to grow personal development in those areas.
Right.
But that's been a real passion of mine. And, I guess one of the questions I have for you is, what's an area, maybe one of those, maybe another one, where you'd say you've really taken the personal development stuff and put it to work.
Yeah.
And you can talk us through how that goes. What do you do? How do you use personal development in that?
Yeah. I over the years since I've started being really intentional, I probably have hit all of them at some point in time. But generally, like every year, I find that there's a hardcore focus. And this year has been finances. I just have been like zeroed in on, I want to be debt free. Like I want our family to be debt free. Yeah. I want to like shore up some of our weaknesses and get rid of some of our bad habits. And it's not perfect, but this year we've paid off all of our credit cards.
Wow.
Which, was no small feat. Like we weren't sinking or anything, but and
but it's hard. Every dollar is hard, right?
It is.
Doing that, yeah.
It is. And you have to, it impacts so many other things too, like so many other buckets of,
money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It impacts the way you deal with your relationships and your marriage and your, like all of the other things really it touches. Sure. But, so what I was able to do with the system that I use is, figure out at the beginning of the year what I wanted the end of the year to look like. And then I kind of just worked my way back on, like the steps that we needed to take to get there. And, my husband and I talked about this too. Like just today, I'm like, okay, I'm starting like annual planning for next year. What's on your mind? We have to have those conversations with our family and our, especially our spouses. But, we ended up cutting some stuff out, changing our eating out habits. And
can you talk to, like one example of what you cut out?
We cut out some subscriptions and we cut out, eating out habits. Okay. Like those were eating out habits is a big thing for us. We like to Grubhub food. I'm not gonna lie. And when we go out on dates, we will go out to breakfast at Reedville or whatever. Eating out is one of our favorite things. It's really expensive right now.
Gosh, it got expensive, right?
Yeah. So every time you go out to eat, when your mind is set on those types of things, you're like, but I could be paying off like this chunk of change,
Yeah.
So we made that change. I also started to invest in, like, when I'm scrolling through my Facebook feeds, Ramsey is like one of the dudes that pops up on my reels all the time. Like I started to steep myself in, like, who do I know that's doing this well that can like impart wisdom and inspire and encourage me to make these wise decisions, because they're constantly reminding me that this is like the end goal and where I want it to be, So,
so you're reinforcing with messaging that's going that direction. That's smart.
Yeah. And also I'm leaning into knowledge that I already have, because I've done things like Financial Peace University, so it's just a constant reminder of, the steps that I already know that I should be taking, but aren't actually implemented. So I think like if I were to think back on all of that, and if I were starting today, I think getting plugged into the resources that you want to, getting plugged into the resources that you need to get plugged into to learn the things that you need to learn and start taking those steps is valuable. Number one, you need to do that after you decide what difference you want to make,
Right.
And then make sure that you're getting around people and resources and influences that help you stay on task.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, a little bit of social accountability, kind of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you tell anybody besides Rob that you wanted to make progress financially?
I did. Yeah. I have, I would say, an accountability partner.
Okay.
And that's my best friend, Trace. She and I, we sit down and we talk about these things all the time. So we kind of help.
Isn't she in like financial services or something?
Yeah.
So she's like...
Yeah, I'm the creative brain. She's the financial, like numbers person.
Yeah.
And so
That's what I thought. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool.
So...
Very good. Well, thanks for sharing your process in that.
Yeah. You've been on a journey this year too, it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably been longer than a year, but I had, this year I've been hit with like some health things, and it's been kind of tough. Different than I'm used to. I remember going, there was a certain threshold. I can't remember how old I was turning, but I remember hitting this wall going like, why is my stomach bigger than it was? I'm eating the same that I always have.
I can so
3
relate
cheeseburgers
to that,
at lunch, whatever I want. I also, it's like sleeping has been hard. Like all the stuff that I know that old people tell you you're going to go through. And then you're like, yeah, right. But your body changes. And then I fell off a ladder, and I think that jolted some things.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I had this neck injury not that long ago, and it was 4 bulging discs in my neck, and like very debilitating.
Yeah.
So with all that stuff, I've had to just kind of take a step back, and if going through those list of 6 things, for me, health has had to become like front center focus because, I mean, we've set up our life to be fairly energy demanding. On purpose.
Active,
I mean, we do a lot of stuff. Our schedule's kind of crazy. We have a slice every week that is non-negotiable, 24-hour period of time called our Sabbath. It's a Monday, and we just don't give it up for anybody. We don't do any work. We do whatever we want. We play. We don't answer emails. All that stuff. That's wonderful, and it's kept us alive.
Yeah.
But the rest of the week is nuts, and we kind of like it that way. Except when we don't have any energy. And so for me, I've had to really go to work on this and make sure that I'm in the best health I can be, because I want to serve my family. I want to live long and prosper. I want to have all the energy I need to fulfill the calling that God has for me.
Yeah.
And then some,
Yeah, I love your and Melissa's marriage goal.
Oh, yeah. We want to be 100. I want to live to be 121.
Yeah.
Because that's when we'll get to celebrate our 100-year anniversary.
Yes, that's
in
awesome.
Rome. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So we have the place picked out
where
already.
you're trying to get. That's awesome.
Yeah. I told my doctor that the other day, actually. I was in the doctor's office, and I said, I want to live this many more years, so help me get there. And she was just like, what? Why? Why that many more years? And so I had to explain this. But
that's awesome.
Anyways, for me, I would think about, we shared a process on Sunday that was just a very simple, like maybe picture it in a circular diagram, the idea that when you think of an area of your life like health, the first step would be evaluate. And you did that with your finances. So evaluate's the first step. And I really had to do that and go, okay, let me evaluate. I know I'm not sleeping well. Let's think about why.
Yeah.
And the truth was, I was drinking coffee till 7 p.m., kind of eating up until I go to bed. Sometimes working late at night. All the things that they say don't do. Reading my, scrolling through my phone right as I'm trying to go to sleep. All this stuff, right? And so I actually had to read a book on sleep, and that helped me a lot. And I learned that I was doing all the things that would make me not sleep. So I could then reverse engineer. Okay, then what makes you sleep well? Go study that. And so it's partly diet, it's partly activity, it's partly, do I have a wind down routine? I learned this thing called 3-2-1 sleep from Brenda Burchard, which is 3 hours before bed, don't eat anything. 2 hours before bed, don't work on anything, like your brain.
Yeah.
And 1 hour before bed, no screens.
Wow.
So no eating.
I'm doing it wrong too.
3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1 sleep. And then, I've learned to do a little breathing routine. That might sound super weird to people, but just some deep breathing before bed just kind of releases all the anxiety or whatever that might be left. And when I do that, I sleep lots better.
Awesome.
But then it's about, well, I know what to do. Am I consistently doing it?
Yeah.
So it's evaluate and then plan. And that was kind of like, for me, okay, here's what I'm going to do differently. And it was about going to the doctor. It was about getting my blood panels, because I found that just as a person, a male my age, that was a factor that somebody else shared with me. Like, hey, some of the things you're describing, it's probably blood levels. And I was like, what? So went in, and sure enough, it was low on 6 things. Wow. And I was like, how did that happen? I didn't, wasn't that way a year ago. Well, yeah, that's just what happens.
Yeah.
So I had to change a number of things I was doing and eating just to fix that. And that really made a huge difference in energy. And, so there's other things too, but I did have to share this with a small number of people, what I was going to do. And then the action is there. So it goes evaluate, plan, share, act, and adjust. And then I would say probably for a good year on some of this stuff, I've just been adjusting.
Yeah.
I try one thing, for a few weeks. And if I don't see any movement, then kind of go back to the drawing board and go, maybe I'm not doing enough of it, or maybe I'm doing too much of it.
Right.
And so that's been kind of my process on that. I would say one blessing is that my neck issue's been resolved.
That's awesome.
So that's been awesome. Yeah, because that was really hard to get through a day that way.
Yeah.
But
with the discs and stuff, I've experienced that too. So I love that idea that evaluation never stops.
Yeah.
And it's okay to pivot and shift. That's one of the biggest things that I struggled with when I first started implementing this stuff is, okay, I've got a plan now. I've got to stick to it, and it's got to look exactly like this.
Right.
Flexibility is absolutely necessary in that so that you can make changes. So
yeah. And I mean, even in all the studies of the greats in the world, modern or ancient, you're seeing people that would just, they would just take a different approach, because if they've tried it several times and it's not working, they're going to keep trying. The goal is the goal.
Yeah.
Not the way we do the goal. That's not the goal.
That's good stuff. I like it. Yeah. Wow.
I think one thing that has struck at me as I've even just been talking about this is that I haven't mentioned the word God or any Bible verse in any of the things I just said, but God created our bodies, and He does say in Scripture, "Your body's my temple." And so for me, on the health thing, that's been what's driving me. But in all the areas of personal development, it's this Scripture is so full of all of this guidance and teaching on being a steward of what God has given you in your life. And sometimes that's social influence, sometimes that's money, sometimes that's a talent or giftedness, whatever area it is. But the clear responsibility seems to be grow it.
Right.
Here's what I'm giving you, grow it.
Yeah.
And I think that's been what I felt that responsibility.
I like that. I like that you pointed that out. I was at a women's conference this weekend, and the speaker, one of the things that she said is that it's our responsibility. She was talking about that moment when Peter got out of the boat to walk on water.
Okay.
And she said, getting out of the boat was on Peter, and walking on water was on Jesus. And I think that it's really hard. Like, there's a tension to manage between the responsibility that we take in our own stewardship and what it is that God's giving us to take ownership of, and what God is supposed to do. And the fact is that there is responsibility that we have to carry. And like, we do need to take steps and steward and, engage in what our piece is. And then we need to let God do the rest. And He does call us to steward. So I think that's really cool to point out. One other thing that came to mind is I was looking through a book just right before we met, and there's this quote that Mark Batterson says, "You can do nothing wrong and still do nothing right. Our calling is much higher than simply running away from what's wrong. We're called to chase lions." And it speaks a lot to what it is that we're talking about right here. Like, we're called to chase after those things that are big deals,
that's good. I mean, because that's really the motive behind all this, right?
Yeah.
There's something big out there for each one of us.
To
get ready for it.
Yeah, and then to think about what that impact has in our family is huge, and that we can be a leading domino in that. So all of this to say that our own personal growth sets a tone in our home to create space for our family to grow personally. And that just creates more of a healthy household.
Yeah. Magic.
Yeah. So on that note, if you're listening or watching and you're interested in help with this, we have this amazing download. It's called the Healthy Households Download. And you can get access to this if you just check out the link in our comments, in our notes. Also, we talked about Michael Hyatt's book, Your Best Year Ever, and also Brendon Burchard.
High Performance Habits.
Performance Habits. So if
Fantastic.
You're interested in any of those, you can check those things out in our description and have at it, man. Chase after things that you want.
And then email us because we are nerding out waiting for the next tip from you on what we should do.
Or drop in the comments.
There you
Share
go.
all of your wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, do that.
All right. See you guys next week.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Midweek Motivation. To make sure you don't miss any content in the future, please subscribe, share, and if you enjoyed this, give us a like. And consider popping by a Westside service some weekend. You can find out more at westsidecommunitychurch.com.